Hey guys, this beautiful quilt is finally ready, and so I just wanted to share with you in the beginning so that you can be inspired to actually make this. Now let me take you through what I actually did. So this quilt is called Summer Blossom and it is made with fat quarters. Okay, so I used a border for 5 inches. The border is called watercolor style and the background is called the backing fabric is called butterfly spots, and it's absolutely beautiful. So with the actual quilt itself, we used 7-inch squares for each square that we made, and we made a 14.5-inch block. You need 15 blocks to make the whole quilt, and we also used some corner sashings as well, so they're all up there, as well as we did sashings of 2.5, and our white border was also 2.5. The print itself, I didn't really want to cut it up because there's such beautiful floral colors for the actual quilt. It's really beautiful. The size of the quilt is 58 by 90, so it works out really lovely. It's a lovely throw size, and it's absolutely beautiful. So I hope you follow through with this tutorial and make your summer blossom quilt. So let me show you how I do it now. Hi guys, welcome back to Crafty Quilting Designs. I hope you're doing really well with your life and everything is going really fantastic for you. Today's tutorial is going to be called a summer blossom quilt, and we're going to be using a 7.5-inch squares. And the reason why I've chosen that particular size is because we will be using fat quarters. You can, however, use a layer cake or charm squares for this. Just bear in mind that your actual block will be smaller. All right. The actual block turns out to be a 14-inch square, and we're going to be doing some snowballs in the middle as well as the end, or the end tops, so the corners of that particular quilt block. Now, if you're going to be using fat quarters, and the reason why I've decided is that because my fat quarters have some really beautiful large floral prints on them, and I didn't want to cut them up into pieces, and I wanted to actually show the beauty of the fabric. And sometimes it's really good to do that rather than just the quilting style or the piecing style of the actual fabric, and then bringing all of that together. So in this particular case, this is what I chose to do. Also, it's beginner friendly, it's intermediate friendly, it's advanced friendly. So if you're in the mood for something just to chill out and make a beautiful quilt that, you know, doesn't have too much piecing in it, this is the actual quilt for you. Now, with this particular cut of quilt, because we're using 7.5, there is going to be some wastage, but ping, I've come up with an idea of how to actually use those pieces or those trimmings to make an actual quilt, and I will show you how to do that towards the end of the video. So stay tuned and I will show you, but I'll give you a quick sneak peek of what that actually looks like. So this is what we will make with all of the trimmings from our 7.5-inch block. It is actually a diamond in a square. Isn't that fantastic? And again, all made from the trimmings, and it could be a scrappy quilt. So yeah, another tick off the box as well. So there you go, 2 quilts from one set of cutting. Isn't that brilliant? So I will stay tuned and I will show you how to make this block quite simply, and how we can change it also into another block as well if you don't want to go to this option. So stay tuned, let's get started, and I'll take you through very quickly how to make the block, and we will take it from there. All right, see you in a moment. Okay, so to make the quilt block, what we need is a 5-inch strip, and these are for the corner snowballs. So the middle corners are going to have snowballs, as well as the end corners are going to have snowballs. In this particular case, I have used white, and I am going to be using a 5-inch square. Now, if you're cutting from yardage, you need to cut a strip of 5-inch and then cut that into 5-inch squares, like so. You will need 4 for each block. Okay. For your snowballs, for the middle, you would need 2" squares. All right. If you are going to be using a patterned color, so you will need to make sure that when you pin it on, it is front sides together, and I will show you how to do that in a second. So I'll just have this particular one here as an example, just to remind me to show you how to do that. And of course your 7.5" fat quarters that you would have obviously prepared for your blocks. So not to worry about what the quantity you need. I will of course give you a free pattern so that you can use to your heart's leisure. So if you were using a layer cake, obviously your squares then will be 5" squares. So you'll take your one 10" square layer cake and cut that into 5" squares, and then you would have to, you can still go with a 2" square for your corner, but in this particular case I will do a 4" square for my snowballs at the corner, but I will put that variation in the pattern as well for you. Alright, so in total you need 4, 4 and 4. Okay, now to put this together, it's quite simply, and because I didn't want to cut it up into small pieces, I'm going to try and figure it out and put it back together the way it was, so that it made this particular pattern in the middle. So I don't really want to take it out of shape the way it was before. So it's up to you how you lay it out. Make sure you're happy with it, and I think I will go with that. That looks fine for me. What I tend to do is areas where it's not any particular pattern, I will use the center. So then my center squares goes there, there. Now obviously I'm using a solid color, so it doesn't really matter what way I face it. If I were to use this particular patterned or print one, I would need to put it face down. Alright, so that once I stitch this on, then I can then turn it right side up on the other side, and I will show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to remove this because I'm not using that, and I'm going to put this one back there, and the other one's in the corner there, and that one there, and I'm going to pin them, making sure they're nice on line, and I'm going to pin them in the corner, make sure that's nice and flat. And I'm pinning them into the corner because I don't want it to interrupt when I'm sewing, and also when I'm actually measuring or marking the particular fabric in this case. So I'm going to pin them all, and this enables it to stay put without any movement as well, because obviously what we're doing is making more or less excuse me, what we're making is snowballing the corners, so more or less half square triangles. Alright, so right there. So put them all back together, and that's the way I have kept it once I started sewing, so that I can put it back in the right place and I don't move around my blocks and get myself confused. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the other corners, and again make sure that when you put the 5" squares down, or whatever size you decide to go with, you face it opposite your initial square in the middle. And again I do the same thing, I pin it on. And make sure you do this, because I actually made a mistake twice and had to take them out because I was not paying attention to what I was doing. So pin it down so that way you know it's there, and then you know there's no mistake of picking them up incorrectly and sewing it incorrectly. So just pin it. It really takes away the hassle of having to unpick it. So again, make sure all the edges are lined up nicely. We'll do that final one there. Okay, so once you've done that, you have two options. A, you could get a ruler and measure point to point, from there to there and actually stitch it down. Okay, so you draw a line from point to point on all 8 of them. So the 4 in the corner and the 4 on this particular. So I'll just do one as an example so you know what I'm referring to. So I'm going to do it on the white so you can see what I'm referring to. I'm just going to put these at the side. Alright. So you're doing it from this end to that end. Right, so as long as you're not doing it over the pins, because those are reminders as well, that your line should not be going through the pin. Your line should go opposite the pin. So mark it, and I'm just using an ordinary pen here because number 1, I'm going to be trimming this off. Number 2, I'm going to stitch on the line and you would not see it. Okay, so you do that for both of the squares. Point to point all the way through, and my pen is not working. Or if you want, you can actually fold this as well and iron it and have a press line there. How did I get? There we go. I've got some print now, it's come alive. I'll do that one again as well. Or if you want, you can eyeball it if you know you're confident at doing those sort of things. So then we will stitch along there. Now, what I have also found as well, if you just go just slightly beyond that particular marked line there, just literally slightly, then when you fold this over, it literally comes to the end and recreate that particular square. Sometimes if you go a little bit too short, yeah, that's what's going to happen. So imagine this bottom bit gone, it is not going to be squared off properly. All right, so we needed to literally replace that there. So it's like that when you fold it over. Okay, so that's what you will do with all of your squares. You mark it down the line, you stitch just a hair of it right to the front of it. So remember, you're stitching on the side where the pin is, you're not stitching on that side. Okay, just slightly, because if you stitch on that side, it's going to be shorter once you fold it over. So just a hair literally on that marked line, as well as the same for this particular one in the middle here also. Once you've done that, you will then trim it off. Now I leave it pin on once I cut it off. So basically, I'll just demonstrate this. You sew it down and you would literally measure 1/4 of an inch. And in fact, to be honest, don't be picky about this, okay? It doesn't necessarily have to be 1/4 of an inch away. I'm just saying that so that you are mindful that you would not cut into your stitches, okay? So as close as you can to that particular marked line, and you cut it off, which will enable you to be left with something like this. And these are not to be thrown out, just leave them stacked, and this is what we make our blocks from. Okay, so I will show you how to do that. So just stack these, put them aside, forget about them. Okay, now when you do cut these particular ones out, which will be a lot more smaller, I'll just measure that one there, so obviously you can see it's a previously cut one. Okay, but I don't necessarily keep these. If you do, you're more than welcome to, but I tend to get rid of them. Alright, so that's your decision. So sew them all together. Once you've done that, then you iron it. So once you've made the block, don't iron it as yet. Iron it after you've actually made the block. And this is what your block is going to come out looking like. Right, so that's your block there, where you have your snowball in the 4 corners as well as in the middle. And remember, I said I use scrap fabric for these particular cuts here, and you know, it's no point, if you've got scrap fabric, you can use some up for this rather than having to find another piece of fabric and cut it all up. If you want, you can use the same color scheme throughout. So for example, if it's blue, you can use blue in all of your blossoms. because this is a flower essentially is what we're creating. Okay, so that's that. Now the block itself measures to 14 inches square, depending on, you know, if your measurements are correct, but I don't want you to cut it down. All I have done is just ensured that the edges are nice and straight, and mine's comes out at 14 and a half. Okay, so just trim them down, because these are really nice, beautiful big blocks. I don't want to lose the beauty of the borders here, as well as our corners. All right, so just leave it as it is and just trim them up so that it's nice and straight. So don't trim it down into a size, just keep all of your lines straight. Now for our sashing, we're going to have one on each side there and one on each side there. Okay, now what you can do is leave the left side out and just do the right side only. And the reason why I say that is because we can just put a whole long strip of border on the whole of the quilt once we have sewn it together. All right, well, of course, I will show you my example, but if you're going to be cutting, I will definitely say just cut all of your strips. So make one block, and then you would know how much your strips is going to be, depending on what size you choose to go with. So mine is 14 and a half. So my strips, and I'm going to be using 2 inches, will be a 2-inch strip that sews onto the edge of the right of each of my particular block. So what you would have is each block will be laid out like this. So that is what it's going to look like. All right, and then we will have a sashing in between here, and then a sashing all around it. So, but I will show you once we get to that stage the idea of building the quilt. So that's it. So what you need to do now is get all of your cuts done, and then get your blocks being made, and then we will take it from there. So remember, you need 7.5 for each of your squares. You need 2 inches for your middle, and 5 inches for your end. So snowball 5 inches, snowball in the middle, 2 inches squared. All right, so let's get into that, and I shall see you in a moment. All right guys, so I have stitched these blocks together, so let me show you very quickly how to cut them. So again, I'm going to use the block that I actually marked. So I'm just going to measure, and then I said you don't necessarily have to measure 1/4 inch, but because I know I'm going to be using these blocks for a particular new block later on, I'm going to try and be not to waste as much as possible. So then cut it off, and I have clipped mine so they stay together like that. All right, so then turn it around, and you're going to cut the other bit off there. So cut it off again, and then you have recreated that particular block. I'm just going to finger press it down. That's one. Do the others. I did just put the iron on it just to set the seams. I just stamped it on very quickly. I didn't really move the iron to press it obviously, so I just placed the iron on just to set the seams. I am only going to iron the block once it's actually made, so I'm not going to be doing any ironing at this particular point. So once I've made the whole block, then I will iron it down. Make sure everything is nice and flat. There isn't too much seams, but as usual, you need to be mindful of the machine just to make that quilting experience a lot more better and not break any needles. Okay, so that's the end of that. so once you have actually finger press all of them, and you're going to put them back together in the way you had planned initially. Now if you wanted to take a picture so it reminds you of how to put it back, entirely down to you, or you can just simply play around until you find it back again where you had it before you took it to the machine. Shouldn't really make a huge difference to what you've planned. And again, make sure you press your seams to the dark side. It also helps it to lay a lot flatter as well. I'm just forcing the seams back as I finger press them here. And the last one. Okay, so that is your block there, and of course we're going to stitch it together. Once you've done that, make sure you line it up. Okay, so front sides together, line it up from point to point there, make sure all the edges are secure and they match up, because we want the centers to meet accurately. And what you can do is make sure these seams here match up nicely, and put a pin in there. Then go over to the machine and sew it. Same thing with this one. Front sides together, match those seams, make sure they're nicely nested. Pin, stitch, and then you will have your block made. Okay, so both sides have been stitched together now. Next step, fold them front sides together, butt these seams up, and again I haven't pressed it as yet, but because it's not much seam in there and it's not fighting back, so I can simply just nest them together in my hands like that. And again, pin it, and again go on the machine and then stitch all the way down there. Okay, the block is now made. So the objective is to get all of these points nicely meeting. Okay, mine is just about slightly missed it there and there as well, but it's not a problem for me, because once you stand back you don't necessarily see that, so that's not an issue. So I'm going to press this now, and make sure you open up the seams, press them nice and flat, so that we can have a nice quilting process that's nice and easy. So that's your block all done, and you need to make the rest of them. All right, so you need 14 in total for these blocks, so go ahead and make them all. Remember, as I said, trim them down. So for example, if you look here, you can see that those joints there slightly peek out. So I'm going to bring it closer to the camera, slightly peek out there. So that's what I mean. So just tidy up the edges, don't trim them down to size. The objective is to have nice big blocks there again. All right, so do that with all of your blocks, and then we will do the sashing together. All right, so it is completed now. So it looks okay. I'm happy with the outcome. Just a few things I wanted to bring to your attention when you stitch yours together. So this is your block here. All right, so when you do put your blocks together, I actually use scraps for the center. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but I thought let me say that now. Now if you wanted to cut up an extra fat quarter, you're more than welcome to do so, but I had some scraps and I thought it's only 2-inch square, why not just use some scraps and pick out the colors within the fat quarter themselves from the block to use as my center. So for example, this was blue and I used a solid blue there. Okay, same for this one. I picked up yellow, I picked up white there, I picked up purple for this particular one, and I added a red in the middle there. Okay, so you can do that with yours. Just use up those scraps again, you know. If you wanted to lay the blocks out without the sashing, that's a good idea too. You would obviously get a diamond in between, so just imagine without the sashings there, you know, so you would just get these corners here together that will give you that diamond at each junction for the blocks. All right, and that's without the sashing. I thought about it. I did lay it out and have a look. I had also taken some pictures as well, so when I do the pattern, it will be there for you to choose as an option. And then I also decided was to go ahead with my initial plan, which was to add the sashing and inner borders, and I'm quite happy with the outcome. I love it immensely. It looks really beautiful. The colors are really nice. And remember, I said I didn't want to cut up my fabric into small pieces, because the floral colors, you know, the floral prints themselves are really big and beautiful, and I just loved it the way it actually is. All right, I will call this a weekend quilt because it did stitch together quite quickly. Even if I have to be honest, it didn't take long. And I know I say that on a regular basis, and you know, it came together quite quickly. But when I say that, it really does. I mean, my previous quilt, as I said, it took me 2 weeks to actually figure it out in my head, and you know, the layout, etc. But this one came together quite quickly. It was relatively simplified. I don't like using the word easy because what's easy for me may be difficult for somebody else. So it was a simplified process. Hence the reason why I said it's a weekend quilt. So yeah, one thing I would remind you about is once you've made your blocks, just play around with the color scheme in terms of the palette, what it looks like in terms of laying it out. So you don't want to lay two similar colors together for your blocks. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Other than that, it's relatively, you know, straightforward. Another thing I would remind you about that there is no matching seams in this one, so everything comes together nicely. Nevertheless, there's only one matching seam actually, if I have to be honest, as I just remembered, is the middle there. So these ones is where you'll have to match your seams up. Some of them I did slightly missed, but then again, it's no big deal if you're slightly off course in it. So for example, let me find one for you. So for here, you can see it's slightly, you know, like in the corner there, but that doesn't bother me, and as well as there, that doesn't bother me. So if that bothers you, by all means pick it out, but it's okay, because from a distance your eyes don't initially zoom into that. There is so much beautiful colors coming back at you that's the last thing you're actually going to see. So I wouldn't worry about that really. Okay, so I would urge you not to do that to yourself either. Let me step back a bit because the sun is obviously going in and out and changing the color. So yeah, so now we're going to add a 5-inch border around it, and that's another floral print. And then I will show you the completed look with a quilt. It is absolutely beautiful. It's really simple to put together, and it doesn't take long, as I initially said. So, you know, it's one of these things that where you do a happy sewing moment. Not that, you know, quilting isn't, but normally, you know, we buy fabric, we cut them into small pieces, and it's usually the piecing that is the objective, you know, to turn the normal fabric into something beautiful, you know, and artistry like. However, with this particular one, I think it's also really nice to show the prints, you know, and the colors within the particular fabric, and hence the reason I went for these particular fat quarters, and I didn't want to cut them up because the prints are so beautiful. I mean, look at them, they're absolutely lovely. So, you know, and I wanted to keep them at the size that they were, and I wanted to use big sizes as well. But as I said, if you have layer cakes or charm squares, you can use those as well. Okay, or you can use yardage, you know, so the options is really there for open. So yeah, so let's get started onto the borders, and then we will take it from there. Okay guys, so this beautiful quilt is ready, and it has turned out absolutely lovely. I use a 5-inch border, and the border print is called Watercolors. Just absolutely beautiful. I'm actually in love with this quilt. You can see all of those huge florals really coming out, and it just makes the whole pattern much better. So I hope you can understand why I didn't really want to cut it up into small pieces. I just really fell in love with these particular fat quarters. For the quilting, I actually did some flowers and just some leaves and it's an all over pattern for it. And I was particularly brave this weekend. I actually used a orange threading on my particular quilt, so it looks really nice. And you know, I just wanted to try it out and see what it looks like, and I'm quite pleased with it, to be honest. What's the point in buying all these beautiful color glossy threads and you don't use it? So yeah, if you're happy and brave with your quilting, by all means have a go. That's what they're there for. So it turned out really nicely, and as I said, I'm pleased with it. Looks really fantastic. On the back, it's a beautiful butterfly print, and again just plays in really nicely with the title of a summer blossom quilt. So again, lovely. The print for the butterfly is called Butterfly Spots, and I think it's well named. But absolutely lovely, and works really well. The quilt itself is really nice and light. When I finished quilted it, and I didn't do it very dense, so I was quite happy with it. So it's nice and light, you know, it's a beautiful wraparound, it's beautiful throw size. So I look forward to hearing about yours and your comments and your experiences of how this went for you. So don't forget to like, subscribe and to share. And you know, I love it when you get in contact with me and let me know how your experience is going and whether you enjoy my quilts or not. It's so happy to communicate with you on those levels. So bye for now, and I shall see you next week. Alright, quick sneak peek of next week's block. This is our square that we made from our scraps. We need 4 of this to make the block, and let me show you what it actually looks like. So remember all of the scraps we had from our 7.5 for our block this week. We're going to make this block. We're going to put them together this way and that way, and then that way in the middle, and we get a beautiful block with a Grecian pattern in the middle. If I turn it the other way, we are still going to get a diamond in the middle with an X. So next week this is going to be our block, and I'm going to take you through how to actually make it and stitch it together. So this is going to be our scrap quilt. Remember, keep all of those scraps, and then I shall see you next week. Have a good day. Bye. Hey guys, I just wanted to remind you very quickly, if you're enjoying other tutorials from Crafty Quilting Designs, don't forget to like, subscribe, share and hit that notification bell. I also wanted to share with you that we have decided to give away a quilt when we reach 1,000 subscribers. Currently we're at 428. We will send this particular quilt anywhere in the world. So please don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now. Happy quilting.